We're good to go.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm calling to order the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission public hearing at 5:02 p.m. on Thursday, January 15th, 2026. This is the January 2026 hearing of the Beacon Hill Architectural Commissions. My name is Mark Kiefer. I am the chairman, and we are joined today with Commission Vice Chair Arian Allen, as well as Commissioners Feingold and Richmond. Today, the Commission will be holding a public hearing to review applications in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, including subsequent amendments for conducting the meeting online, which is to say over Zoom. And to ensure public access to the deliberations of the Beacon Hill Architectural Commission, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing, again, aka Zoom. As you may have heard, or in case you just joined, the hearing is being recorded, so all further conversations between commissioners should be audible to the public in attendance until the hearing has adjourned. At this point, we'd like to acknowledge any media or elected officials who may be present. I think I saw Dan Murphy from the Beacon Hill Times. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining. Any other members of the media or elected officials or representatives from elected officials' offices? I don't think I see any. It's getting to be a long list. Let's see. Okay, if anyone else is here, please let us know by raising your hand in the Zoom, and we'll certainly be happy to acknowledge you. So let's see. I think we're ready to begin. First, we have just a housekeeping item here. We need to ratify not just last month's, but the prior 2 months, because we weren't able to do November's last month. So we're going to ratify the November 20th and December 18th. I think those should be 2025 minutes. Yes. And let's see. Did anyone have any commissioners have any edits, revisions, questions, concerns, or abstentions for let's start with November 20th, 2025 hearing minutes?
Yeah, this is Alice Richmond. I'm going to abstain from both of them. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Let's see. Nick, I think emailed you a couple of minor revisions to November. Those been incorporated in the current version, or do you need me to restate them?
If you wouldn't mind just restating them for the record, I'd appreciate that. But I did make the adjustments in the
okay.
document. Yes.
Sure. Let's see. So again, with respect to now simply the November 20th meetings for 9 Louisburg Square, the project representatives, the full name should be Emily Sanders Coutu, which is Coutu, in addition to Bob Palladino, were the project representatives. For 52 CHESTNUT, there was just a minor typo in the applicant's name. Should be Rob Ferree, Ferree, no L at the end. And then finally, another just correcting a spelling of a name, 101 Pinckney, in the list of folks submitting comments and or speaking in public comment period. Daryl Pomicter, Pomicter, is the correct spelling of his name. So I will move approval of the minutes with those 3 revisions. Do I hear a second?
Second.
This again is November 20th, 2025 minutes. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We will vote. Commissioner Allen. One more time, Arian.
You guys can't hear me?
It was just cutting out.
Okay, aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, and Commissioner Richmond, I understand you want to abstain, but go ahead and do
That's
that.
correct. I abstain. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the November 20th public hearing minutes are approved with the stated revisions. So moving on to December 18th, 2025 public hearing minutes. Again, any questions, concerns, revisions, or edits?
No.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve December 18th, 2025 minutes?
Well moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, and Commissioner Richmond. Wow.
I abstain. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the December 18th public hearing minutes, 2025 public hearing minutes are approved. So we'll move on to the section 1 of the agenda, violation review, and I believe we have one item on the agenda, which is 31 Charles Street. I think I saw Steve Young on there. Is it just you, Steve, or someone else? Can you
Sorry,
unmute?
sorry. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, or evening. Yeah, Jean Raphael
I see him.
is on. You see him, Nick?
There he is. Cool. Thanks, Steve.
Jean Raphael is actually presenting it on behalf of Sicily, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you all.
Steve, I'm going to go ahead and mute. Okay.
Yeah.
Jean Raphael, go ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Nice
Please.
to meet you all. We did receive that violation, and that's indeed for something that we didn't respect the rules, the guidelines. We went a little bit too fast as we wanted to protect the view of the construction that's we hope soon to be started. We signed the lease now last year for 3133 Charles Street, and we covered as fast as we could the view inside the property with decals that were outside the windows instead of inside. The reason being is a choice of protecting and avoiding getting rid of the interior protective film that's on the windows, as this is something that we will need and we want to keep. It was a pure sustainability choice, but we completely overlooked the rules of the commission. So what we are asking today is, considering that this is temporary, would it be possible to waive that violation as we are trying to open that store somewhere in June, hopefully? If not, we will obviously abide by the rules. We will take down these windows and we will do something probably similar if we're allowed to inside to abide by the commission rules.
Okay, thanks very much for coming in. We appreciate your attention to this matter. And I just realized, I think in my haste to get the meeting started, I neglected to mention another just procedural item, which is that the public will have an opportunity to make a public comment on the record, and we'll indicate as we adjudicate each application when it's time to take public comment. If you do want to take public comment, make public comment on the record, you'll just need to raise your hand, not just physically like this, but using the button probably at the bottom of your Zoom panel in order to do that. And I want to mention that as we can take a public comment on this one as well. But so we're looking at, Jean-Raphael, a photo of the store as it appears. I guess maybe it's a rendering, but it's representative of what's on the store now. And am I correct that this is a corner building, so there's at least one more panel of glass, which would be to the right of this photo on the CHESTNUT Street side as well, that similarly has a decal like this?
This is correct.
Right, okay. And presumably it has again some lettering with the brand name on there as well on the CHESTNUT Street side. Okay, very good. For the moment, commissioners, just any questions? You've probably all seen this by now. It's a pretty prominent location, so you probably walked by, but just for the moment, clarifying questions as to what the current condition of the building is.
My question is to understand this proposal as these are affixed to the exterior of the glass, but only as a temporary solution waiting the finishing of the construction, at which time they would be removed and the decals either replaced or somehow replaced on the inside of the glass. Is that correct, sir?
This is correct. We will, I mean, it's the last time we are doing exterior decals, and I'll make sure all our teams read perfectly the guidelines. But this, as soon as the store opens, and we are hoping for June 2026, these decals will be gone and the store will be refilled.
And you would, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mo.
These applied in a way which is subject to vandalism at all? I mean, you have exterior decals, but
there is a risk, to be honest, of you need to be a very stubborn person to go through and vandalize that. In any case like that, we could
We have some of those in Boston.
I imagine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jean-Raphael, just to further confirm to Commissioner Feingold's question, presumably when you are ready to open the store or at some point before then, probably before then, you would make a formal application for whatever signage you ultimately plan to use. In other words, this is not necessary. This is a temporary measure in every respect. It's not necessarily indicative of the signage you're planning to use, but at some point in the future, before you open, you'll make a formal application after you've determined exactly what signage you propose for the building.
Absolutely. On February 4th, I think, is the next hearing, a public hearing. On during that date, if the violation is waived, our architect and our merchandising team will be able to introduce to you via a normal application the what we actually want the store to look like as a final rendering.
Right.
And,
Okay, very
Mark,
good.
just for your knowledge, I've already been in contact with the branding team about signage and an application that will be submitted in the future. And also, just for the record, you may have been looking at the Boston Landmarks Commission hearing schedule. The next schedule is scheduled for February 19th with a deadline of January 28th. So,
Thank you.
and Mark,
Okay, very good.
I just want to be clear, regardless of if the decals are inside or outside of the storefront, they're still under our jurisdiction because they're sticking to the window and considered part of the window. And if you recall, for the nut store and then the other building businesses, these are fine, but you do have to apply for them and give us like a set amount of time in which the decals will be up. So just to make sure that we're on the same page here.
Completely understood.
I have a question, Mark.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Richmond.
Yeah, I understood that the reason they were put on the outside was because of a film that's on the inside that the petitioner would like to keep. Is that film something which we have already approved?
I don't know. Alice, sorry. It's possible that this was Benefit Cosmetics, the
Right.
old store there. It's very possible that there could have been some sort of film on the inside that was applied for. I'd have to go back and
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just think that the record needs to be clear that, and I don't know whether the film is something that requires our approval or not, but just as a kind of side note to this whole thing, let's just see whether or not the film is something that, we needed to look at, approve, did approve, etc.
If I can complete on that,
Sure.
we have a very similar store in New York City in the Meatpacking District. At some point, one of our vendors doing this kind of windows decided by themselves to take out that film, which is not changing it's not visible to the bare eye. It's something that's protecting products and protecting from the UVs. And as a skincare company, we try to push for that. It cost us a small fortune, or definitely something that was not planned to replace that UV filter. So we are usually careful when we go into a new store to try to just keep everything that's possible and stay a little bit sustainable on our actions. And that was the main motivation. But yes, indeed, that led to that decision.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Commissioners, any other clarifying questions before we take public comment on this?
Yes, sorry, I want to come back to my original question. The film I understood was it was temporary, and when your store is finished, the film will come off.
No.
Is that correct?
The windows on the outside will come off. So the pictures that you see here, we obviously want the entire store to be visible to everybody. So we will take out completely these windows. We will replace that by something that will be approved by the commission in advance, and that will be a little bit more aligned to all the open stores we have in the US. On the film on the inside, if will be maintained as it's not something visible.
I see, thank you.
Okay,
right.
why don't we go ahead and take public comment? Again, if you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in your Zoom using the button probably at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and Nick will call on you in turn. He's going to need to unmute you, so please make sure you get that hand up in the Zoom, and Nick will call on you in turn and unmute you.
Okay, let's see here. I saw Juan Carlos, but I think he might be with the brand team.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
But he lowered his hand, so maybe he had
Okay.
his question answered. All right. First up we have is Rochelle with the Civic Association. Rochelle, go ahead.
Yeah. Beacon Hill Civic Association, we oppose this application because guideline I-10 states that exterior walls may not be used for temporary advertising boards. The applicant should consider limiting the graphics to a single instance of featuring the store name to meet guideline I-9. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. Next up we have is my friend Rob. Rob, go ahead. Good to see you.
Thank you. I agree with the Civic Association's comment, but I would probably go a little further. I'm the former chair of the Civic Association, and this issue with decals on windows, I've been, as Nick knows, complaining about for a while. They seem to showing up all over Beacon Hill. They're on Myrtle Street, they're on Charles Street, on at least 3 other stores on Charles Street. They seem to be an easy way for stores to advertise cheaply. And as Rochelle mentioned, they're totally against the guidelines. They're temporary advertisements, that's all they are. And here's an example of where one was put up without approval, though the guidelines are pretty clear. My real concern is the precedent that would be caused by allowing this to go forward, even on a temporary basis, because the guideline precludes temporary signage, as Rochelle mentioned, and that's exactly what this is. And as I heard earlier, it's a 6-month proposal to keep them up into June. The answer is really simple. Take them down. If they want branding, hang it from inside the windows. Inside, not touching the windows, but this could be put on placard boards on the inside, not touching the glass, and they'd be perfectly appropriate and not even within the jurisdiction of the commission. So my issue is it's a cheap way to do advertisement on storefronts that violate the historic district guidelines, and I see no excuse for it, honestly. Going forward, it doesn't, by precluding it, it doesn't preclude anybody from advertising this is their store. It's just we're not letting them do it cheaply and against the guidelines. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay. All right. Okay, Mark, I don't have any other public comments, so I'll send it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Thanks, Rob. I mean, you heard the commissioners, you heard the public comment, you heard from the applicant here. You know, I think in my mind, yes, there's certainly, and I'll just read it out here since Rochelle and Rob both mentioned it. Under the sign guidelines, section I, says exterior walls may not be used for display of merchandise or temporary advertising boards. We could probably debate, you know, whether to what extent this, you know, the intention of that guideline, which is now ancient, meant windows, or whether this is a wall within the meaning of that guideline, whether it's an advertising board within the meaning of that guideline. But I think that what, not to put words in their mouth, but perhaps what Rob and Rochelle are reacting to is what might be characterized as the spirit of the guideline, which I think is I would characterize myself anyway as intending to, like all of the sign guidelines, limit visual clutter on Charles Street, and the use of, let's say, buildings that are under repair or otherwise unoccupied being used, as we've all seen in other construction sites, to be papered over with posters and things like that, as the extreme example. That's not what's, I think, before us here, but to try to mitigate or prevent that kind of unsightly contribution to the streetscape. You know, I think balanced against that, since it is, I think, ultimately an aesthetic consideration that we're concerned about, and mitigating a negative aesthetic impact or visual impact is, I think the alternative is, and we can see it just down the block in the Beacon Hill Hotel at the moment, it's papered over with brown paper on the inside that looks like, a paper grocery bag or something like that, which, has its own, I think, negative impacts as well. So I think that's the tension here. Personally, I think as far as these things go, in terms of visual or aesthetic impact, this is not bad. But commissioners, does anyone have a view of this, given what is likely to be the alternative, or would you suggest a middle ground if you have one?
I don't know if it's the middle ground, but what I'm seeing, and I mean, it's already been mentioned. Well, though this is not unattractive. If somebody else comes along and uses the same excuse, and they'll use this as a precedent, and guess what? Let's say that they don't have something as attractive as this. Now we're gonna what? Say, oh, well, you can't because it's not as cute. I mean, there's a slippery slope that we're on. And while I don't mind what I'm seeing, that doesn't mean that later on that something else is gonna come by that is gonna be unattractive, but they'll turn around and say, well, hey, you did it for this particular storefront, why won't you do it for us? And we've seen this time and again. That's the only reason why I would say no to this. What I see, I like, but we can't trust that somebody in the future is going to have good taste to do such a thing. And if we say yes today, we're gonna have to say yes in the future, and that's something we really need to be mindful of.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yes.
Mr. Franco, please.
My view is that the concept of the decal was a strange one when I first saw it on the record store up at corner of Myrtle and Joy Street. Having walked by it many times, sort of understood it and got used to it. That doesn't mean that it makes sense everywhere, but it is a way. Maybe it's around. Maybe it goes around the provisions of the guidelines, but it does not affect the architectural character of the street. What affects the architectural character of the street, in my view, is, of course, the fenestration, the window pattern, the methods of framing and detailing that, and their necessary replacement from time to time, and the projecting signage, about which we have been in an orthodox manner, clear about pendant signs and how they're hung and what they are. And that, to me, is part of the architectural character one sees as one would walk along the street. What's going on in the windows, to me, it doesn't matter. I appreciate Mr. Whitney's comments about temporary, and what the guideline says about temporary signage. But this is not, I think there's nothing, I think it sets a precedent maybe for temporary signage, but perhaps we could add a caveat to it that there's a time limit, that if the store isn't done by June 1st or something like that, or, that stuff comes off. Because who knows about construction, about what might happen. Surely I know, as an architect, things get delayed and so forth. And I think that, so I'm not opposed to this conceptually. because as I said, it does not affect the architectural character of the street long-term by any means.
Well,
And-
remember, there's a caveat. If you read the staff notes, saying that if it's going beyond June, then you
Speak up
can do
louder,
another
please.
application.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Arlene.
I'm sorry. Am I too low, guys?
A little bit.
That's better.
Okay. No, so there's a caveat that from the staff note saying that if the construction is going beyond 6 months, they have to do another application. So that's opening up a door to say, well, it could be instead of 6 months, 9 months, or heaven forbid, a whole year. As you say, construction and things happen. They always do. And I mean, just stop and think of seeing a street loaded with this. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. We've seen this kind of signage before. You see it in Copley Place. Now imagine Charles Street looking like this with a few stores, not one store doing it, but a few different stores. This is the way we need to start to think, because this one thing, which I'm very tempted to say yes on, because it's not unattractive. It's not offensive. However, not everyone's going to have good taste. And in the future, you can have somebody come on with something that we don't necessarily like, but hey, we did it for them. We're going to have to do it for somebody else. We really need to think like that.
I think in response, in this case, there is a very large store that is being proposed. There are two entrances off of Charles Street. There are very few instances in which there are stores like that. It's a very large retail and undertaking. I just, as I said, I don't think it affects the architectural character, short-term or long-term. What it affects to me is the concern of what an exterior decal, how it survives in the weathering, various weather conditions and vandalism. And then it becomes an eyesore. And then we would say we could give a provisional approval, or something like that. But anyway, I'm repeating myself, and I shouldn't take
Well,
time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Alice. Commissioner Richmond, go ahead.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Feingold. One of the violation is that this stuff is on the outside of the windows. So the question is, if they put the identical thing on the inside of the windows, whether that would be within our jurisdiction and something that we would challenge. So I agree with Mo that the problem will be whether or not it's going to last a Boston winter without degrading, and or whether or not it gets vandalized. And so I'm not opposed to it. I think it's prettier than looking at a construction site, which is what happens when you don't have that, or you're looking at, as you pointed out, a brown paper bag. So I would be prepared to vote for it, but I would join in as well with the idea that it is time limited, and should it get defaced or it begins to disintegrate, that the obligation is on the petitioner to take it off and do something different inside the store, which doesn't require them to maintain the outside integrity of the product.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Richmond. Let me just offer my thoughts. I appreciate all this helpful discussion.
Mark?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. It looks like Juan Carlos has had his hand up for a while, and I think he's part of the team. So I just want
yes,
you want to
please.
see what he has to
Forgive
say?
me,
Okay.
Juan Carlos. Do you want to weigh in here?
No worries. Thank you so much. And First of all, thank you for being understanding about our situation here. And I think as a brand, we would be willing to agree to, like, if it gets substantially damaged to a point where it becomes an eyesore, which is, I think, one of the main concerns of Commissioner Feingold. We could agree to replace the panel so that we maintain the character. And obviously, like we said, it is a temporary solution. And as you mentioned, I mean, aesthetically, I think one of the key words that I saw in the guidelines afterwards when I saw it is that it does not create visual clutter, which we don't feel it does. And I feel you guys agree with us on this. And regarding the comment about, this is a slippery slope, I totally understand where you're coming from, Commissioner Allen. But I think that's what these meetings are for, right? Where you guys make a determination whether the guidelines apply, and if it's, visually crazy, let's say, or something that's not aesthetically pleasing, you can make a determination in the future and say, well, this is not adhering to the fact that it's creating visual clutter, or it's not aesthetically appealing on a case-by-case basis, no? And so I think with those things in mind, we definitely, appreciate the approval on a temporary basis. We can set it to whatever, to the date that you feel is, reasonable. And after that point in time, if our construction goes beyond that, we would remove it and take the necessary measures to comply with the solutions that you provided by doing something on the interior. And as a business, I mean, also we're definitely not pushing to go beyond our construction scope, because we start paying rent to our landlord and everything, so we got to be done as soon as possible. So it's in our best interest as well to do that, no?
Right. Thank you, Juan Carlos, and forgive me. I'm on a small screen with a lot of small squares of all the people, so forgive me that I didn't see you right
No
away.
worries.
But thank you very much for your comments. So with respect to what's already been said, I'll just offer a few thoughts. With respect to the precedent, I think, number one, I appreciate Commissioner Allen's caution in that regard, which she's made often, and I think is always appropriate, because we always want to think about making a consistent and defensible record of decision in these cases. At the same time, of course, we are, our job is to adjudicate these applications on a case-by-case basis, and every case is unique because it's a unique building in a unique context and a unique proposal for that building. And so I think I don't believe, just personally as a matter of principle, and certainly not as a matter of law, that we are somehow legally bound by a determination in one application to make the same determination in another. Certainly, for sure, Commissioner Allen is absolutely right to observe that we ought to be forward-looking and think about the implications for how we think about further decisions at a minimum, for sure. This is, I think, if not a unique case, a rare one. And I want to echo Commissioner Feingold's point here, which is this is a very large storefront. It's a corner building, and it is almost entirely made up of large plate glass windows. That's an unusual circumstance on Charles Street, in the district in general, and certainly on Charles Street. Not unheard of, because in fact, if you literally look across the street to the right in this photo, across CHESTNUT Street, you see a very similar circumstance, which is the Beacon Hill Hotel. And as it turns out, perhaps conveniently for our purposes, that space is also under construction right now, and its windows have similarly been covered up, but in the more traditional fashion, with the paper shopping bag type treatment on the inside. So we have a rare opportunity to compare the two outcomes, because they're literally right next to each other in otherwise pretty similar circumstances and pretty similar buildings. So again, with respect to the precedent, this particular circumstance is rare. I think what has been installed in this case is something, again, to Commissioner Feingold's earlier observation, we have in the past approved small in scale, reasonable in size and number, decals in lieu of conventional signage like projecting signs and belt signs and so forth. And so while the applicant is not proposing and has made clear that they're not proposing that this would be the permanent solution, or even that decals in the windows would be the permanent solution, they'll make an application in due course for what the permanent signage will be. But I think if it was permanent signage, just the logos and so forth, we might entertain something like this, perhaps not as many logos and so forth and so on.
Correct.
So all to say, I think it is at least very, very generally in the abstract, consistent with types of signage we have approved on a permanent basis. In my opinion, I will echo Commissioner Allen's observation that I don't hate this. I don't dislike it. I think it's tasteful. It's aesthetically pleasing. I dare say, just on the merits of the aesthetics, I think I would prefer it to what's next door at the Beacon Hill Hotel, the brown paper bag stuff. But I'm at the same time sympathetic to the observation that it's on the outside, so it's you know, it runs the risk of deteriorating and so forth. The staff has recommended that we put a time limit on it and require the applicant to come back and make a new application for this if they want to extend it, and that would give us an opportunity to reevaluate it at the time, either because it hasn't aged well, because we've reconsidered its visual impact, for any other reason. So I think under those circumstances, I think I'm willing to allow this, perhaps with that important proviso. But let me ask one other question to my colleagues on the commission. I'm gathering that part of the discomfort over this, where there is any, is that it is in effect, and not to speak for Rochelle and Rob, they certainly were more than demonstrated that they're more than capable of doing that themselves. But what I gather from the public comment is, you know, the advertising nature of this. Now, ultimately, I think all they are advertising in this case is what they would ultimately be advertising with permanent signage, which is the brand. That this is this store. It doesn't even say what it is. So I'm less troubled by, and I'm less inclined to interpret the guideline, you know, strictly as this is the equivalent of an advertising board. If they're not, for example, advertising some other business, some other product, they're not even advertising the products soon to be sold by this business. They're simply, this is taking the place of permanent signage on a temporary basis. Sorry, long-winded preamble to ask, maybe Commissioner Allen in particular, would you be more comfortable with this if there were just fewer logos? That's a middle ground I was contemplating earlier.
No.
I mean, even with fewer logos, we go back to the brown paper bag, which will make it even more odd.
I'm just saying, imagine like the middle three, they just whited them out or something.
Why bother to do that?
But you tell me, that's not worth it. Okay, yeah, no, that's what I want to get at.
I would just, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, those of us who are perhaps older women know exactly what Sisley is.
Yeah.
So to us, you know, that's the brand. We know that brand. We're seeing it on the windows. It doesn't bother me, the size of it. And the thing that I like, frankly, are those, you know, pretty blue, whatever they are. And, you know, it seems to me either we allow it for all the reasons we've already talked about, I think at length, or we don't. And making it less isn't going to make it any better.
Sure.
For the problems that Arian has and which, you know, might occur. So you know, let's leave it.
That's why I'm asking. So thank you. Okay.
Chairman, I call a question.
Yes. Okay. So I'm not sure we have a firm consensus, but I think we have enough for a motion.
Mo has a question.
No, I'm calling the question, meaning.
He was politely requesting that we get on with it, as we say. And thank you, Commissioner Feingold. So let me set up this motion by saying the following. In light of the unusual circumstances of this particular location, of an unusually large storefront that is almost entirely comprised of plate glass windows, in light of the temporary circumstances of the material that's been applied to the windows, and in light of the fact that it is only, by and large, the branding which would ultimately eventually be contemplated for permanent signage that is on these decals, and that there is not specifically further advertising material that might be understood to be contemplated within the meaning of the guideline specifying a prohibition of, quote, advertising, external advertising boards, that the violation be dismissed and the application be approved with the proviso that it will be good. The application, the approval will be good only for 6 months from the date of approval. And in order to, for the decals to remain on the building after that date, that the applicant will need to make an formal application to renew them in advance, and the commission would then reconsider them at that time.
Can I make a friendly amendment, Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead, please.
I think including in the conditions, a condition that if because they are on the outside, if they get defaced, degraded, vandalized, that the petitioner is under the obligation to come back to the commission with a proposal for either replacing them in kind or doing something different. But I think, my concern is, the fact that they're on the outside, which is what the violation was, and let's just make sure that they stay looking pretty, if that's what they're going to be, for the duration of our decision.
Nick, are you okay with that? You might have to make the decision as to when what would constitute that condition.
Just thinking about our area of purview, we don't have any purview around maintenance, but we can make a comment in the letter to state, as a good neighbor, we would expect that these remain in a state of good condition or something to that effect. But
that would be fine.
Yeah, our purview does not involve maintenance. Sometimes we wish it would, but it doesn't, sadly.
But I think I do think that one of the people who spoke on behalf of the petitioner said that they were going to, it's not to their benefit either to have defaced and degraded signs. So I feel comfortable that they'll do it, but I think that something in the letter, Nick, as you suggest, is fine with me.
I can do that. Yeah.
Okay. So we won't formally amend the motion, but do we have a second on the unamended motion?
Second.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen.
Nay.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes, which means the violation is dismissed and the application is approved with that proviso. You will get a letter from Nick, Jean-Raphael, and Juan Carlos describing, summarizing our determination. If you have any questions as to what it means or what to do, please just follow up with Nick directly. His contact info will be with it, of course. Thanks for coming in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to section 2, design review. First item under the design review agenda is 127 Mount Vernon Street. Is there a representative from 127 Mount Vernon? Which is, I believe,
it's Daryl. I see him here in the. I'm going to go ahead and try to unmute him. Daryl, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening,
yes.
Mr. Chairman and the Commission. Daryl Ramdahal, Rogerson Communities Management Agent for Hill House, Inc.
Thank you, Daryl, for coming in. Do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you have in mind?
So we recently had to decommit. We recently replaced the door and trim and frame at 127 Mount Vernon. The old intercom system did not fit. It actually, due to age, we had to decommission the old system. We are proposing to go back with a new intercom system, a video doorbell system, which is much smaller in size. As you can see, the old system was roughly about 2 feet long, about 4 inches in diameter, pretty bulky. The unit that we're proposing to put in is less than 4 inches in size, about an inch in diameter, less than 8 inches in length. As you can see by the photos there on the screen.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
We've got a couple of intercoms on the agenda tonight. There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's only the center unit, Mark. The other ones are for the interior spaces.
I
Got it.
can't
Okay.
hear you. Speak up, please.
It's the center unit. Sorry, Mo. Thanks for that. It's the center unit only. The other one that my mouse is over, that's for the interior space.
Okay. And the dimensions of the proposed middle one of those three?
Section part 2, parts identification for the external part. Yes, top right corner.
I can't read that.
Yeah, Daryl, do you have that in front of you by chance?
I do.
Okay. Yeah, what does it say?
Yeah, the parts identification, lower, upper right corner. The width of the unit is 3.79 inches. Diameter is 1.06. Length is 7.72 inches.
And the color of the material?
It comes in black. Or dark gray, I should say.
That's the choice.
Commonly used in schools throughout the city. Correct.
Thank you. I have no problem with that.
And
Does that fit on the masonry? How does that attach the masonry?
So yes, it should fit in that cast stone area between the trim and the cast stone. However, it was brought to my attention today that the trim, the exterior trim that we're looking at, was not replaced in kind and should be replaced in kind. I did speak to the vendor today about it, and we are going to proceed with fabrication of replacing that trim before installing the intercom.
So it would fit on that
Correct.
that vertical that side
Yes.
face that
Yes.
okay. And that's
Nick?
wood. That's wood you're going to fix it to?
Correct.
Thank you.
Nick, did I cover everything?
The material of the cover of the intercom is a black metal.
Okay. I heard that. Most of our metal is we've been approving is yellow metal, and do we have example? I'm sure. I mean, you have this composite memories, Nick, chairman of the neighborhood. Do we have black?
We typically approve brass,
Okay.
and the guidelines do recommend brass.
Okay. I don't have any problem with it.
Okay. I'm sorry. So let me forgive me. I just wanted to make a disclosure on the record. I had not realized when I saw the agenda. I know Rogerson has a management contract for Hill House. I'm on the Beacon Hill board for Rogerson, so I'm going to abstain from this vote just in the interest of caution, and I'll try not to. I would have done that ahead of time if I had realized that, but just for the moment, a disclosure on the record. And I'll just limit my comments to helping facilitate making sure we understand what's contemplated here. Mo, to answer,
Mark,
yeah,
I think it's best that you just kind of recuse yourself, and I can
Yeah.
text you when you come back, and we can
Okay.
hand it over to
yeah,
Arian.
yeah. Okay.
And if you don't mind just turning off your camera.
Yep, I will do that. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'm going
Sorry
to
about
recuse
that.
myself on the record for this application. Sorry not to do that in advance. I just didn't realize who was actually bringing the application. But it sounds like you've got it well in hand. Arian, if you can just take over for this one, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
And you, just to leave off on the comment of these intercoms usually being brass, is that something that you're able to do to make it brass, which is more common here in Beacon Hill?
Unfortunately, no, ma'am. This particular unit does not come in brass. The manufacturer does not and cannot furnish a brass unit.
Can you not use somebody else who would do provide that brass unit?
We can certainly go back and explore this option.
Yeah, because that's what we do here in Beacon Hill with that.
Can I just, Arian, this is a schoolhouse. I mean, and I live a block from it. I think, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with it about, houses and brass and stuff. But, this is Hill House. It's a not-for-profit. If it's going to cost a lot more, I know I'm supposed to not say that, but if it's going to cost a lot more to go back and try to find a brass thing, I mean, I don't know that it makes a bit of difference whether it's brass or black in terms of the aesthetic of that firehouse. And so, rather than sort of wait, because it's a building that's used all the time, I think the best thing is to try to get this thing on as fast, as quickly as possible. And if they have something that's that small, that's going to fit, that they can put on the wood, I would just think we don't need to really insist on brass. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know I did it at the wrong time.
Alice, for what it's worth, they do have a temporary intercom that's in place right now.
Oh, they do? Okay. All right. Well, that is worth something. Yes. Thank you.
Nick, can I clarify? It's not a temporary intercom. It's a wireless doorbell that we're using.
Okay. Same functionality.
Yeah.
Daryl, is Jamie part of your team?
Jamie's part of the Hill House team.
Okay.
I saw her hand up.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and unmute her. Sorry, I should say Arian. Is that okay?
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay. Jamie, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm the program director over at Hill House. Daryl, thanks for presenting this on our behalf. Thank you to the commission for hearing us out. Daryl is correct. We do not have a functioning intercom, and we have been without one for many months now, and it is greatly impacting the safe entry and exit of children into our building, which is what our business is. It is a safety concern, and I totally respect the commission's decision for us to investigate a brass coverage. But I do think, per Daryl and Rogerson's expertise, that black was, as Alice mentioned, a little bit easier for us to facilitate. So we'll follow your lead here, but I did want to stress the impact it is having on the youth that we serve. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jamie.
May we hear from Rochelle?
Actually, it's not time yet, because I'm going to ask you guys, do you have any more questions before I let in the public? Anyone else? Any more questions from commissioners? All right, I'm looking forward to hearing from Rochelle and from Robert, if he's going to speak.
Okay. And just as a reminder, if anyone has any public comment they would like to record, you can raise your hand in the app. It's a small little hand, and it looks like. First up, we'll have Rochelle go. Rochelle, Civic Association, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose this application with certain changes such as concealing the intercom inside a hinged brass or bronze cover box to meet guideline E7, since the proposed product is aluminum faced and features a lighted panel. We feel that the applicant needs to submit a shop drawing to meet guideline A6 for highest quality workmanship by demonstrating how the smaller product will fit in the new door trim that was not replaced in kind. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. Next up is Rob. Rob, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Nick. First of all, there is another product in brass made by Comlit, same company. I'm looking at it right now. Model number 3202-RI Roma series. It's nicer looking, actually. Comes in a brass feature. It has the same functionality camera. It just takes 2 seconds. It took me 2 seconds to find it. So there are many, many options. There is no problem. I understand Alice's comments. This is not a delay. This is something it's a guideline, and there's no reason not to enforce it under these circumstances when it's just as easy to do so. The fact that it wasn't done, I'm happy to send this. I'm sure anybody could find it, since I did it while you guys were talking. There's many different models available. They all look about the same price. This one has a video camera. It's a brass plate. Looks pretty nice. I'd like it on my house. So there are a lot of options available. So I think the fact that that hasn't been done or looked at, I don't think that's really the commission's problem. I think the guidelines should be enforced. The question I want to mention, what Rochelle mentioned, it's hard to tell from the drawing that's been submitted whether it's backlit in some fashion, whether there's a light. There is a mention on the drawings of an LED light. It doesn't say exactly how it functions, whether it's projects out like a camera light, or whether it's just on there in a feature. It's also unclear how many buttons would be on this. It seems to be there's a singular button. There's an option for at least 4 buttons, I'm not sure what the proposal is. It's not in the proposal as to how many would be there. And they do appear to be lit on the diagram. It looks like there's little bulbs in there. But again, I think Rochelle makes a good point. There should be a drawing that better articulates what's being proposed. But in terms of a cover, a brass cover is easily obtainable, and there should be no reason that the applicant can't comply with the guideline, just in that regard. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rob.
Any other comments from the public?
Don't see any other, Arian, so we can turn it back to you.
Okay.
Can we ask the presenter whether he was aware of the device that was just described by Mr. Whitney?
I was not. Actually, we hired an electrician to seek out the replacement of the intercom, provide specifications, and I did go back to the electrician that we hired and asked if this particular unit came in brass. I was told no. That's the reason I said no when I was asked earlier. I stand corrected now, so I do apologize for that. I was unaware, so I'd have to go back and state this new finding.
I'll send it to Nick if that's okay. I'll just clip it right to him and he can share it. Is that good?
Appreciate it.
Of course.
So that definitely gives more options, and making sure that we can try our best to stay within the guidelines. The guidelines, no, they're not the holy grail, but they're there for a reason. And that reason is to what? Maintain the history of our neighborhood as best as we can. So I think the brass would make more sense. It's something that we do ask for. And thanks to Rob, very easy to find. And thank you, Rob, for sharing that with Nick so he can share that with Daryl. Yes, when we look, we find, yes. All right, any other commissioners with questions? Debate?
So Arian, is the idea then to continue this for a month, or do you think that we could approve it with the proviso that staff approve the device? In other words, it seems, again, I am very cognizant of the number of kids, in and around that building, going in and around that building. And, I think this is a really important piece of equipment to get on. So rather than wait for another month, could we approve it as brass with Nick as the person who, deals with the final? Yeah.
Yes, because of course, we don't ever want to drag things out. But again, before I even go that route, anybody have any other thing that they would want to say? I'm looking at you, Commissioner Feingold.
Yes, thank you.
Of course.
I was interested in the comment made earlier that all of the public schools in Boston use a black annunciator. Is that correct? And that somehow the comment was made that this Hill House, being an old fire station, that it having a black cover would not be so unnatural.
It's used primarily as a nursery facility or a kids facility. That's why I said it, Mo, because it's a school.
Yeah, and schools are generally have a black thing, a black annunciator, a panel. Okay, so in other words, it could go either way. In a way, you can want to go, as Nick said, we approve. I believe Nick, you said we approve black a lot of times as well as brass.
No. Typically, it's brass that we approve.
Yes,
I can't think of a a time where we've approved something that's not brass.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I misunderstood. Because I know that our discussions in the residential zones have certainly been about brass. Okay, thank you. That's clarifying that for me.
All right. I am willing to motion to approve with the proviso that the covering is done in brass and to the liking of staff, Nick and staff, to move forward with this issue. Does anyone second?
I second it with this amendment to your motion that shop drawing be presented with the new jam condition installed or proposed, that being all wood and a wider piece of wood, and that just the gadget be explained so that how many buttons and how many lights there are, so the Nick has a better understanding of how it fits within our standard.
All right, fantastic. So the formal motion with the amended provisos, you've seconded?
Yes.
All right. Let us bring to a vote. Commissioner Allen is aye. Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
Richmond, likely Richmond. All right, the ayes have it.
Good.
All right. Thanks, Daryl. I'll get you your letter tomorrow, okay?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too. Have a good one, guys. And we need to bring back our chairman.
I'm going to text him now.
I'm here. Thank you, Arian, for stepping in on such short notice. Apologize again for not giving a heads up. I just didn't realize. But thank you. 8 Walnut is next on the agenda. Let's see, is there a representative from? I see Gina Juszczyk, or at least Gina Juszczyk's Zoom there. Can we? And do you have who else? Just let me quickly look at the agenda.
Hi there, Gina's. This is Scott Juszczyk, and
Yes.
Gina's here as well. She's coming over.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for coming in. Do you want to give us a quick summary of what you are proposing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for giving us the time tonight, guys. Appreciate it. So we just want to install a keypad for our garage door. In the picture, we proposed installing it on the granite, but we've since heard that that's not a popular place to do it. So happy to move it over to the brick. You know, my opinion, just living here watching it, it would seem like it's less conspicuous if I was to put it on the granite. But I understand that you guys like to do it in between the grout of the brick, so there's no damage to the granite. The other solution I had was perhaps gluing it using either some sort of adhesive and gluing it to the stone as well, so I do no permanent damage to it. In terms of the size, I got a tape measure here. It's about I don't know, 4 inches wide by about 5.5 inches. You see that? 5.5 inches tall, so about 1.5 inches deep, just in terms of scale. So that's it. Pretty straightforward. The one other, I guess, piece of information you should have is that if you can see the granite post that has the red box on it. If you look at the one right behind that one, that's actually another entry, and that entry has a very similar device. It's in black, and it's a buzzer, and it's been there for about we estimate about 60 years. So this would be consistent with sort of what's in the front of the house, and I am sort of at your disposal.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Quick question, just to clarify, the device which we see pictured here, and I think you were just holding, is there any wiring, or is it just wireless and it's got a battery?
It's just wireless with a battery.
Okay, so it would, in principle, be an option to mount it on the granite without drilling any holes. That's at least the immediate concern that we have about masonry, and that granite, at least in the photo, looks pretty pristine. So we would be very reluctant, I think, to do anything that would have a permanent implication for that. Let's see. So, but at the moment, it does not have a cover. Is that correct? You just see this display in the keypad?
Yeah, yes, it's just this keypad as it sits right here right now.
Right. Okay. And so we're talking about either the location outlined in the red box in the image we're looking at, or it's been suggested in the alternative to do on the brick face just adjacent to that, next to the granite. Okay. Commissioners, any other clarifying questions? And this is Walnut Street that we're looking at here, just for context. It's just to the left here of this image.
The question is, what is the precedent for this detail on granite or brick along the way? And
So,
the color.
so
Not
actually,
only
that's
are they
great.
attached,
Scrolling right real quick, just so you can see, just for scroll in closer to the door. You can see there's the black device there. And so, I just want to, again, I'll do whatever you guys want to make sure we get this done. But I guess my point is that in terms of the brick versus the granite, if you go back to that image there to where it was, you know, if I put it on the brick, it just sort of looks like it's such a feature of the wall, as opposed to, you know, every human being who walks by it sort of just looks at the front of the house and sees this thing. So again, I'll do whatever you like, but I feel like what she has had there for close to 60 years is just a much less obtrusive presentation of it. That's all I'll say. Sorry.
Okay, and Commissioner Feingold, to your question, just more broadly, because I kind of wondered the same thing. This circumstance of this garage door in the garden wall with these kind of quite, I think, lovely granite piers is quite rare, if not unique. If you go around the corner to Brand Street, for example, where you have a whole bunch of garage doors, they tend to be a wood casing on either side, or just brick. And so we don't really have, I think, an analog to this that I'm aware of, where you can observe such a garage door. That, I'm not saying that there aren't any, but I think the much more common treatment of these things is that they are on the jamb. There's a good example right there around the corner on Branch Street, because there's at least a part of the jamb that's wood. There's another one across the street there. This is Branch. There's another one again. So there's your much more typical, I think, treatment of these things. There's one on the gray there across the street. Is put on the jamb, but in all of these cases, there's at least a bit of wood to mount it in.
right? Thank you.
But there's yet another one on the jamb on the red there. Another one on the brick there in the jamb. On the wood again. So that would seem to be the prevailing way this is done.
But none, sir, excuse me for interrupting, but none are on the face. They're all on the.
Yeah. Generally speaking, they're on a jamb of some kind.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
I suppose one advantage of that is you only see it from one direction. So you know, that's probably in part what's motivating that. Okay, so any other clarifying questions for what's proposed? Again, just to summarize, at the moment, it doesn't have a cover. It is wireless and doesn't require any a wiring to go through the wall to make it work. It's pretty small. It's black. Okay, let's go ahead. If there are no further clarifying questions from the commission, to take public comment on this. Again, if you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand using the button on your Zoom panel, probably at the bottom. Nick will unmute you and call on you in turn.
Okay, first up we have is Rob. Rob, go ahead.
Oh, hi, thanks again. Sorry, I'm busy tonight, making comments on everything. My real question is, I'm not sure why you need this device at all. My understanding is the LiftMaster Garage Opener series is internet capable, and then you can open your garage door with your iPhone. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. I know people that do that. They don't have a garage door opener. I'm not sure, particularly in an historic neighborhood with the granite piers where they are. I'm really not sure why you even need it. It's a pretty simple app. It's called I looked it up. I just was looking at it now. It's called the MyQ connectivity app. It's built in for LiftMaster, which is, I think, your garage door. if I'm not mistaken, because that's the unit you're using. And you can use your phone to open your garage door with it. So I'm not sure why you need it, particularly unless there's some special reason. That's my mostly comment, because I don't like the idea of just slapping it on the outside of one of the granite pillars, particularly on this grate, which is a beautiful street in our neighborhood. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Next up we have is Rochelle with the Civic Association. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose this application with certain changes such as concealing the keypad inside a hinged brass or bronze cover box to meet guideline E7 and locating the keypad on the brick wall to install through the mortar joints that the granite post lacks to meet guideline A6 for highest quality workmanship. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. Okay. Mark, I'm not seeing any other public comments, so we can close it for this application.
Okay, thank you, Rob and Rochelle again. Okay, for me, what this comes down to is, again, this sort of trade-off. I think, you know, in the abstract, we want to make this thing as innocuous as possible. And I think, you know, the applicant has certainly, it seems, taken that into consideration. It's small in size. I think, other things being equal, I would like to see it have a cover with respect to where it goes. It's a bit of a trade-off. It's an unusual circumstance because it's light gray in the background, and so anything mounted on the granite pier is light gray, and so anything mounted on it might be a bit more visible by virtue of, you know, a dark object on a light background. On the other hand, if it's mounted on the inside, again, you only see it from what in this case would be the downhill side of the street. It'd be invisible from uphill of there if it's on the granite. I would not, I think, be willing to entertain an installation on the granite that requires any kind of mechanical fasteners that would be drilled into the granite. So I think for me to be okay with putting it on the granite, understanding the trade-offs here, number one, it needs to have a cover. Could just be a simple spring-loaded cover or box that goes around it, approximately the same size. And that if it's going to go on the granite, it would need to be fastened with some kind of non-permanent, I mean, not permanent enough, but adhesive that perhaps Nick could confirm wouldn't damage or otherwise permanently discolor the granite. If we're not confident that such a solution could be achieved, then I would want it to go on the brick. But I think I'm inclined to think this is about an equitable trade-off, and if we can get it on the granite without damaging being confident that we're not going to damage the granite, you know, maybe I'd be okay with that. Other thoughts, comments, concerns?
Actually, I mean, Rob made a great point. To the presenter, did you know about the app? Where's the? Does anybody know where?
I can undo. I can.
Okay.
See.
Well, hello, I can't hear you.
There we go. Okay, great. Run.
There you are. Oh, there you are.
Rob is incredibly quick with the internet searches. It's really impressive. But I do actually know about the app. I have the app at one of my other residences. But the issue is the app is not nearly as intuitive as you would think, and it's not. I would say impossible, but it's certainly not as easy as a keypad. We don't live in this building by ourselves. We live with a neighbor who's been here for a long time, and collectively, we all sort of decided this was sort of the best solution for us, so that there would be no issues.
And the doors are independent of each other.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, Commissioner Feingold, please go ahead. Mo, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to focus my thought. So I'm worried about putting something on the granite because it's so clean at this moment. But if something can be adhered to it, which can be removed without destroying that in the future, so be it. I think it's better on the jamb than on the face because none of these are on the face of the wall anywhere that we see. I think I think the idea of the app is interesting. I thought of it myself, but, excuse me. It is not universally available to other people, say workers, visitors, delivery people, who might need the code to enter. They don't have an app. So I think Mr. Whitney is right, but I think universal access, it doesn't work for universal access. So I think as proposed on the jam, adhered but not drilled into the masonry is the right solution. Thank you.
Okay, Mo, while you have the floor, what about the suggestion which I made earlier, and I believe Rochelle from the Civic Association also made, and I believe, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick has also made in the staff comments to put a cover over it so we don't see the display on the keyboard?
Yes, that would be fine.
Right,
I
okay.
agree. I agree.
Okay, it sounds like we might be moving toward a consensus, but I don't want to jump the gun here. Alice or Arian,
Yeah,
any
I have a
thoughts?
question about that. You know, I don't know if there is a way to affix it to the granite with some sort of epoxy that could be taken off without destroying the granite. But I'm curious as to whether or not having a metal plate over that device is going to make it impossible to do that. In other words, the metal over the device is going to have some way of staying on the device, and presumably that's going to you know, put it in a position where it might be, you know, much heavier. In other words, to me, the most important thing is that, you know, it be affixed to the granite in a way that enables it to be removed without damaging the granite. And if in doing that, you have a brass plate that, you know, makes it impossible to do that, I would be opposed to the brass plate.
Okay, I suspect that it is possible. There are epoxies that are incredibly strong these days, but that we could just basically specify that's how it's got to work. If we want to go that route. And we could even leave it to staff to work with the applicant to find a suitable mounting procedure, you know, under that satisfies our requirements, that it be non-permanent, doesn't damage the granite and so forth. Arian, did you want to weigh in before we make a motion here?
I mean, if you can, I like the epoxy idea because, again, if it's in the door jam, you can't see it. The only people who are going to know it's there are the people who live there. Ideally, the app makes the most sense because that leaves the building alone. It keeps everything pristine. But yeah, if there's a way to do it where it doesn't hurt the granite and it's out of view, then I'm fine with it. Ideally, if it's gonna be outside, as they already heard, it should be brass covered. But if it's gonna be hidden, which is the most important part, if we can't see it, you know, if a tree falls in the forest, is anybody here?
Amen.
It's not entirely hidden, but it's certainly hidden from one side. I think there is the question of the cover. Nick, forgive me, I can look at it right now, but did you opine I've got it right in front of me, covered with a simple black metal plate? Okay, I didn't want to misstate that, but I was kind of thinking that, like the one that Scott pointed out is already on the other jam, 10 feet down the wall or whatever, 20 feet, whatever it is. Maybe this just ought to be black, notwithstanding the whole discussion in the prior application, which I think is, again, we adjudicate these things one at a time. It's a unique circumstance. But you know, we don't have before us an exact specification for whatever the cover would be. So I might suggest, and I think I might even turn this into a motion, that we make a proviso that it's got to be covered, and we leave to Nick and the applicant to work out exactly how it would work, along with how it would be affixed, understanding that it's got to cover the device, be approximately the same size, be innocuous, and be mounted to the jamb in a manner that ensures that no damage to the permanent damage to the granite.
I can second that.
Okay, let me make it a formal motion. I will move that
Okay.
the application be approved as submitted with the following provisos. That that no mechanical fasteners be used, and that no holes be made in otherwise be made in the granite in affixing the device. That the device be encased in a cover of approximately the same dimensions of the device with the exact specifications, material and color of the enclosure, and the exact method of the mounting to the pier be delegated to staff, and that no installation be made without prior staff approval. And let me just say, so they don't have to come back in the unlikely event. And then if no such mounting procedure, successful mounting procedure can be confirmed and approved by staff, that the device be mounted on the brick face of the wall in the alternative.
Well, in brass. Yes, so let's make that clear. If
Well,
they-
I think in my motion, I'm just saying Nick is going to work with the applicant to figure out what the thing is made of and what color it is, the box that goes over it.
That's
well,
good.
no, if it's gonna be mounted on the brick, let's clarify that it should be brass, if mounted on the brick.
Yeah, I get, we haven't really had that discussion. That's probably my inclination, but I think I'm happy to just trust Nick with that. I think it's very unlikely that we're going to wind up there. So since we don't know in that eventuality exactly what we're talking about, I think I'd rather just have Nick work it out. I certainly trust him to, you just heard him say earlier, you know, he's the one who's basically given us this quite useful de facto standard for how to address these things. So I'm confident.
I understand, but since we're doing it and this is a public record and we're all in agreement about if it goes on the brick, it should be brass. Why not just say it? So it's just all there because we're all in.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure we are in agreement on that because I hadn't really had time to think that through. Or get a recommendation from Nick on that for that matter.
I would say, so Mo hears me. I would say that we're using brass. When we use brass, it's a feature of like a door or an entry system. In this instance, when we're using this simple black matte metal, it's more of a utility than a feature, if that makes any sense to anybody.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
That's my rationale for having this be black and not brass, like the one that would be at an entry as a focal point feature of that door. This it's just utilitarian. That's
So
it.
in other words, Nick, for example, when we're talking about in a door entry system where traditionally it's on the door jamb of a front door, it's adjacent to doorknobs, discussions, locks, and things like that, that typically would also be brass. And so it's to fit into that whole concept, right?
Right. Yeah. The entry's for the fancy people, and then this is for the utility. Right.
Yeah. So this is more analogous to other appurtenances that we might see from time to time in a facade of a building, a pipe or something like that, or a vent, or some other kind of access point for utilities and things like that, which more typically would be black, and to try to make them as innocuous as possible. Is that fair characterization?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Arian, with that in mind, are you okay with leaving it to Nick in the unlikely event that it goes on the front?
Yes, because Nick knows, and Nick probably wouldn't want to be. I don't think he'd use poor judgment. So I get
Exactly. That's you said it much better than I could. That's exactly what I was getting at. Okay, so I've made the motion. Forgive me. Do we have a second?
I seconded.
Okay, we will vote on the motion. Commissioner Allen.
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Okay, Scott and Gina, thanks very much for coming in. The application is approved with those provisos. You'll get a letter from Nick summarizing our determination. Of course, as always, if you have any questions at all, you'll need to follow up with him anyway, but please contact him directly. Thank you very much for coming in.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Look forward to working with you, Nick.
Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Good night.
Let's see.
Okay, thanks everyone for your patience. 40 Joy is next. Is there a representative from 40 Joy who is, I believe, Michael Fay, perhaps? Street and Company, I think I see a hand raised and you are, is that Michael?
Yes. Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
Michael, thanks for coming in. Thanks for your patience. Do you want to, speaking of doorbell intercom things, do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you're proposing?
Of course. I'm from the management company, Street and Company, for 40 Joy Street, and they've had their original intercom system. It's never really been updated since the building converted in the 80s. So this is what they have in place, and we're looking to do the same style butterfly MX system with the brass enclosure box that I've been on past hearings proposing at different buildings on the Hill. So this is what's currently in place. Nick, if we can just scroll down to basically what the proposed, so this is the brass mounting plate with the brass enclosure on a hinge that'll cover over the Butterfly MX model. In the next slide, we'll basically show what that looks like. It'll be slightly taller than the current wood mounting plate with the old intercom on it. So that's only a couple inches further down on the bottom than what's currently there. So this is pretty much all that we're looking to do. We feel like this is in line with the other proposals for similar style intercom systems on the Hill. So I took a lot of this from past applications for the same style intercom installations.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. This is quite helpful. Really dumb question, but this is to scale. So in other words, it would be these dimensions that we see here.
Yes.
One basic question, which in reviewing this in advance that came up. So I understand the current system it's mounted on a piece of wood that's then mounted on that wood jamb like we see there, right?
Yes.
And that your proposal would have the new brass box mounted on a brass plate. So I guess two related questions. In your proposal, does the brass plate go on top of that wood plate, or does it replace it, or something else?
It would replace that
the wooden plate,
the current wooden mounting plate. Yes, that would have to come off.
Okay.
And then a slightly longer brass mounting plate would go on.
Okay, so it's not big enough. If for no other reason, it's because it's not tall enough. I know this is probably an unfair question because you haven't taken it apart yet, but do you know what's behind that wooden mounting board, for lack of a better term?
No, we'd have to basically find that out once we take it off.
I am asking because, again, as you heard, and as I'm sure you know, we kind of want to make these things as innocuous as possible. And so if we could just make it smaller by virtue of not having the brass plate behind it, because, for example, there's enough wood to just put it right on the wood, I think we'd probably be inclined to do that. Do you have any sense of like how big a hole there is back there and so forth?
Well, so I think Nick sort of saw this request coming ahead of time, and today I talked to the company that would be doing the installation to basically ask that exact question, and he said, in short, yes, you could have the wood mounting plate remain. The intercom would be surface mounted on the wood with the custom brass cover and no brass back plate as originally planned.
Great. Okay.
below the brass enclosure would have a flush mounted brass postal lock provision for the postal service.
Okay, that's the little box that contains a key or something?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, is that in your application? I didn't see that in the diagram, but.
It isn't labeled in the diagram, but it is that circle at the bottom.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So another, okay, so help us out here. How does that work exactly?
So I think it'd be a basically small cutout. I don't know. I don't have a drawing or an exact dimensions of what it would be. I think it would be a small cutout of a brass mounting plate
Thank you.
that would surround the postal lock.
Want some avocado?
Okay, got it. Okay, so bottom line is you would need approximately this much vertical dimension, let's just call it for sake of argument, or maybe a little less, but because to accommodate the postal lock at the bottom. And that was part of the motivation for the brass plate, backing plate.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Okay, very good. Okay. By the way, Nick, does that change your recommendation at all?
No, no.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, any other questions about what's proposed here before we take? Oh, just one other question, Michael. The lettering we see here, that is, how does that work? Is that actually cut into the brass?
Nick, if you scroll to the next slide, or maybe one or two more down. So that's
engraved.
Yeah,
basically.
similar
Yeah.
example. That's over at 1 Chestnut Street.
Got
It's,
it.
you know,
Okay.
made by the same manufacturer, same
Right.
style.
Yeah, I figured as much. It's just a little, obviously it's a little hard to reflect that on the
Right.
on the illustration. Okay. Okay. If there are no other clarifying questions, let's go ahead and take public comment. If you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in the Zoom using the button on your Zoom panel. Nick will unmute you and call on you in turn.
Okay, first up is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose the video intercom system because it is proposed to be concealed inside a hinged brass cover box to meet guideline E7. End of comment.
Okay. Thank you, Rochelle. And Mark, I'm not seeing any other public comments, so back to you.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Okay, so this is again a standard now de facto standard treatment of this particular circumstance, which of course has come before us a number of times. Again, as I alluded to earlier, we have Nick has developed for us a de facto standard for this particular circumstance. I think we can take from Nick's recommendation on the application that this meets the de facto criteria for this de facto standard for the use of an enclosure box. And so I think it meets the general criteria that we've used to establish whether or to what extent such a proposal is appropriate in a particular circumstance. And so I think it is. I think the one thing that Nick had noted and that we had discussed earlier is that in the interest of trying to make this as innocuous as possible, that we would reduce the sort of footprint of the whole thing by deleting the brass backing plate as proposed and simply mounting the box on the wood directly, as the applicant has confirmed that that is indeed feasible. Thank you again for Michael for running that to ground, as it were. And then there would simply be a postal box cover installed immediately below, also to be made with a brass cover installed into the wood. And I'm prepared to make a motion to approve with that proviso, but does anyone have any thoughts to the contrary or want to add anything else?
Can I just ask if it's not possible to do it on the wood, are we also going to approve today the original mock-up of the brass backplate?
Oh, I think we've established that it is possible.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't hear that.
Right. Anything else? Okay, I will move that the application be approved as submitted with the following provisos. that the proposed brass backing plate be deleted and the box be installed directly onto the wood, and that the, while not specified in detail on the application, that the postal lockbox be installed with a analogous brass cover immediately below the proposed covering box, and that a revised shop drawing showing the revised dimensions and configuration of the unit be supplied to staff in advance of the installation.
So moved.
Okay, we will vote. That's a second from Commissioner Feingold.
Yes.
Commissioner Allen. One more time, Arian. Okay, sorry, you were breaking up again. Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for coming in. You got a letter from Nick summarizing our determination. And again, we'll just need to get a revised drawing showing the details as revised before you install it. Any other questions or concerns, please follow up directly with Nick. Thanks a lot.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate your patience, everyone. We're almost there. 59 Chestnut, I believe, is next. Do we have a representative from 59 Chestnut? Is that Zaid, if I'm pronouncing that even remotely correctly? Oh, there he is. Can we, there we go.
Hi, Zaid Manjel, Cedar Construction.
Welcome, Zaid. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming in. Do you want to just give us a quick summary of what you are proposing?
Yeah, sure. It's at 59, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm unmuted. 59 Chestnut has a front door. It's now faded and needs to be repainted. They want to change it slightly. They've chosen a color from the Benjamin Moore Historical Collection. It's a pretty close match to the existing, and that's about it. We're just changing the color slightly. The trim stays the same. Everything else stays the same.
Okay, very good. There's the color. Thanks for showing us that. And Nick has indicated in the staff comments, we've looked this up. It is period appropriate for this building. Again, just by way of background, we don't require something as strict as somehow replicating an original paint color for the building or even a color that was once extant on the building, but rather we want to make sure the proposed color is consistent with colors that were in use for the particular period of the building, either when it was constructed originally or what it reads as now, given that it may have had a later significant alteration. So if it's, and in this case, so Nick has confirmed, I believe, yes, Nick, that this color is appropriate for the period of this building.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's pretty straightforward, but and it's just the door, right?
Correct. Just the front door.
Okay, let's go.
Nothing
Thank
else.
you. Great, thank you. And let's go ahead and take public comment. And again, if you want to be heard on the record, please raise your hand in the Zoom using the button. Nick will unmute you.
Okay, first up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we do not oppose Louisburg Green because it meets guideline G1 as a historically appropriate color as matching wainscot green on the historic New England color chart for this 1824 federal style building, and the color swatch submitted is a product obtainable from a manufacturer. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. All right, Mark, I'm not seeing any other public comment for this application, so we can close it up.
Okay, thank you very much, Rochelle. I think it appears that this is pretty straightforward. It meets the general criteria that we've established for paint colors. So I will, unless there is any further discussion, questions, comments, concerns, I will move that the application be approved as submitted.
Excuse me. Oops. All right. Okay, second.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen. Oh, do we lose Arian?
Nope, I'm here.
Oh.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Feingold.
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye. Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. The application is approved. You'll get a letter from Nick just summarizing our determination. If you need anything else or have any questions, please just follow up with him directly. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, and then finally, thanks again for your patience. 29 to 31 Brimmer Street, which is, let's see, let me go back to my agenda here. Tim Burke.
Yes,
Hey, Tim. Hey, Tim.
good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board commission. Thank you very much for this opportunity. The owners 29 and 31, it's a combined building. It's a condominium on Brimmer Street. It faces the river on the back. And the wall that they share with 33 has failed at the roof level. These are some photos of the, this is a photo of the wall. It has a wonderful historic New England brickmaster job there of thin
Right.
tile. So we're looking forward to removing all of that. And I think that they did that because there's really nothing to support any veneer on this wall. And so we are requesting permission to replace that thin brick with a metal siding. And I did meet with the Architectural Commission of the Civic Association on Monday. We discussed it, and you know, they were suggesting perhaps a standing seam kind of look that would be similar to what you see above us on the next building over. There's some metal there, so I did submit an update to that, and that would be fine with us using a 16-inch wide panel, which is about the same size as you see in the neighbor's paneling. And we were proposing it would be in a patrician red color. Originally we had said black, but I did find a color that I thought was a little softer and looked more like a weathered copper.
Is that what's shown in the diagram here, or just to clarify?
No, I could share with you and show you if you would like to see that.
That would be helpful, I think, because I think this is going to depend on, of course, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say in England, and mixing my metaphors here, but sort of what little you can see of this, how apparent it is. So that'd be helpful.
Yeah, there is a slight view of it from the esplanade, but when the trees are out, there would be no view. So I will share now.
Is it that patrician bronze that was circled down there?
Yes.
Yeah, I see. So to put this in context, perhaps for our viewers here, think of the giant head house on top of the Union Boat Club, just on the next block, which is kind of approximately that color, as just an example. Much more visible and prominent, but yeah, okay. I see what you're doing. Do you have by any chance, and forgive me if I've just interrupted, you were about to show us, but do you happen to have a photo of the actual material in place that is in that color?
I do not, no.
Okay.
Oh, I see Nick's got it right there now. Okay, yep.
Okay, so
I'd be happy to get a sample to submit to Nick for his review.
Yeah, I think we probably, would want to have that just in case. Okay, and Tim, just a quick clarifying question. If we can go back, Nick, or whoever's driving, to the photo of the wall itself. I was actually going to ask you, Tim, if that was really New England Brickmaster, because that's what it reminded me of. So
that's what I'm guessing. Yes,
slightly tickled to learn that it is. But anyway. Okay, so just to clarify, because this is, I think, kind of important with respect to the visibility, the affected portion is only the portion, let's just say, that is outlined with the arrows.
That is correct. Yeah, that doesn't affect the chimneys.
Yeah. Okay. So and to further orient us, the chimney on the right is the Esplanade side, and the chimney on the left is the Brimmer Street side. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so again, commissioners, and I went and looked at this, Nick looked at this, you can't see it from Brimmer Street at all. You can't see it from Ugar Way, the sidewalk. It's really just how much of this let's just call it almost lighter colored brick in quotes that you see here within the boundary of the arrows that you can see from the Esplanade, which is off to our right, across all 4 lanes of Storrow Drive and then onto the footpath and so forth.
Right.
Okay, I did confirm, by the way, yeah, there you can't really see them in this picture, but there are trees in the way such that when the leaves come in, you're probably not going to see this at all, but you can
I
see
do have
it.
a photo of the right before this photo is a view from the Esplanade. If Nick, you want to show that, yeah. So the roof is where you see the steeple of the Church of the Advent. It looks like it's coming right out of the roof there.
Right.
So the wall we're talking about is just to the right of the steeple. And
Yeah.
primarily you see the chimney, but I guess if you were really trying, you might see a little bit of this. This is an enlarged view as well, a magnified view.
Yeah, I walked down further to the left in this photo, and you can see a bit more of it, but it's further away. And there's one spot, I think, just slightly near this where there's a break in the trees, but it's pretty oblique, and then it's just a small portion of it, but you can see it. You certainly can see it. Okay, so again, it's just, and that it's that the right-hand portion of about, what is it, 6 feet or so that we see most immediately toward the front of the building is the chimney. So it's not that, it's further in this dimension toward the back, toward the front of the building.
That is correct,
affected wall.
yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
So why do
okay.
we have jurisdiction at all?
Well, you can see it. There's no question it's visible from a public way. This is a public way, this view from the Esplanade.
Okay.
It's good. No, it's a good question. The Esplanade is a public way for our purposes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's just this part that's sort of lighter colored brick within the arrows, and you're proposing this aluminum panel treatment, and based on subsequent discussions with the Civic Association, you're saying you could, if we so desired, make it a standing seam rather than a flat seam application,
yes.
which would look in practice something like that head house that's visible at the top of the screen.
Right, that is correct, yes. Yeah.
Just again, to give us a sense, the color, that head house I'm imagining is almost more like a dark gray, but is it something like that? That's what you're proposing?
The patrician red is more of a bronze color.
Yeah.
More like what a copper will look like after when it first starts to age. That's pretty old there when it starts to oxidize like that. And
yeah.
And originally,
Okay.
when everyone burned coal, that really is why we have that beautiful green copper in Boston. Was coal smoke helped make that happen? Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Any other clarifying questions as to what's proposed here? So, and just backing up a step, Tim, just can you confirm for us, in case there's any ambiguity about this, this is not a brick wall that is being replaced. It's an applied veneer made to look like brick. You can see some pieces of it on the deck there,
Right.
but we're not losing a historic brick wall in this process, right?
No, we are not. No.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other clarifying questions before we take public comment? Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Again, if you want to be heard on the record and public comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom. Nick will unmute you and call on you in turn.
Okay, first up we have is Rochelle. Rochelle, go ahead.
Beacon Hill Civic Association, we have found that the proposed area for alteration is visible from a public way, but we do not oppose the replacement of thin brick veneer with certain changes such as modifying this non-traditional material as it does not meet guideline A2 for matching the visible qualities of the existing historic brick remaining at the chimneys. It does not meet guideline A3 as a missing architectural feature, and it does not meet guideline A3, again, as new work of historically appropriate material, as it is aluminum with flat seams that is not representative of standing seam copper. Because this is our comment and review to the material, the previous material. Thank you, and the comment.
Okay, Rochelle, since you have the floor, I thank you as always for submitting your comments in advance. I did have a chance to look at them. I'm not certain I understood it, so I want to give you the opportunity to clarify that. You were saying you don't object to it with certain changes, but I don't believe I understood what those changes were that you were suggesting, or what would specifically under what circumstances you wouldn't object to it. So can you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, so there are three options here. So in terms of, this is not a historic brick veneer. We wouldn't want this brick veneer to say, so it can be replaced with something else. And there's three options of what it could be replaced with. It could be replaced with real brick that is looking like the historic brick that's at the two chimneys on the right and left. It could be something that's found to have been there historically, or it could be the metal panel product that the applicant had submitted, but not that one, modified to look more like historic standing seam copper.
Okay, but you're not saying you'd only be okay with it if it was copper? That's the part I'm not understanding. If they do the aluminum panel in the brown color or the bronze color with the standing seam, are you okay with that?
Yeah, it's been modified to what we have suggested. So
okay,
basically, like, it was a different product originally, and so our comment is based on that product.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. That's very helpful. Anyone else?
No other public comment, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. That was quite helpful. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, we're not talking about a historic wall that kind of demands to be either restored or replaced in kind here. I did look at this. I think the visibility is quite minimal. It's again only from quite a distance on the esplanade for maybe 70 feet of the esplanade. Remember, just again to orient you, this is the esplanade to your right. So of course this a bit like that garage door keypad we were just talking about a moment ago. It's only visible at all from one side, which is if you go down the esplanade toward Charles Circle from here. You don't see it at all, of course, from the other side because the wall itself is blocking it. And then even then, it's only visible for about 70 feet through a tree. It will be invisible entirely, I'm pretty confident, when the leaves come in because the tree itself is covering the entire sort of space through which you can view this. And so I think it's going to be barely noticeable to begin with. There's a lot of, cats and dogs up there, as you might imagine, just looking around the neighborhood, a lot of head houses and so forth. So there's a lot of metal panels that you can find, the most prominent of which is the giant head house on the Union Boat Club that encloses the squash courts, which is extremely prominent and much, much more visible and is probably whatever it is, 20 feet tall or something. And that is all in a bronze colored copper, I think, with a standing seam panel arrangement and so forth. So under the circumstances, personally, I don't believe we need to insist that it be copper in this case because the visibility is quite minimal, only from a distance. It's not a historic structure that begs for replicating or replacement in kind. And the stuff that it's replacing, while it's again only minimally visible, is probably not a material in the first place that we would have ever approved. So those are my thoughts. And again, the visibility, importantly, is mitigated by the fact that it's only the portion from the deck railing, inside the deck railing, not the first 10 feet or 6 or 10 feet that are comprised of that chimney. So you will certainly still see brick when you look up at the top of this building from the esplanade, and that's mostly what you'll see because you'll be seeing that large chimney that's on the right of the image here. Anyone else have another view or want to agree with that?
No, nicely summarized.
Okay, so and to be clear, I was going to so I appreciate the Civic Association meeting and the applicant meeting with the Civic Association in advance and hashing some of this out, because I think my one concern was going to be the flat seam treatment. And I think, again, just to be consistent with what you do see in other head houses that are more utilitarian in nature here and everywhere else in the district, they're not all metal panels, but where they are, they tend to be of a standing seam configuration that's quite common and traditional. So I was going to ask if we could do it that way too. So I'm happy to hear that the Civic Association is okay with that modification with the revised color and so forth. Anyone else? Nick, procedural question. Do we have a revised application with the standing seam, or do we need to add that as a proviso?
I have the revision. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so the application that is before us now, just to be very clear, is, as Tim described, it's a standing seam panel in the, I'm forgetting the name, but the bronze-like color?
Right, yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so an approval as submitted would incorporate those revisions. Just want to be very careful here to
Yeah,
make
that
sure I'm
sounds
not
great.
mischaracterizing
Yep.
this. Okay. Commissioners, any other thoughts, any concerns about that? Now that we know what it is. Okay, I will move then, in light of the minimal visibility only from a section of the esplanade, which constitutes the only public way from which it's visible, and then at a rather great distance through the trees and so forth, and in light of the fact that the wall in question is not of a historic material, and in light of the applicant's recent revision to include a standing seam configuration in a bronze-like or bronze copper like color, that the application be approved as submitted.
So moved.
Okay, is that a second?
Second.
Okay, we will vote. Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Feingold,
Aye.
Mr. Kiefer votes aye, Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Okay, the application is approved as submitted and revised. Thank you for coming in, Tim. You got a letter from Nick. Any questions, of course, as usual, just follow up with him directly. Thanks a lot. Have a good night. Okay, administrative review items. Commissioners, any questions, comments, revisions, recusals on any of the administrative review items?
None.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay, we will take public comment if you want to, anyone, I think the Civic Association had a written comment on this, so I want to make sure they get an or in here. If you want to be heard on the record in public comment on now specifically any or all the administrative review items, please raise your hand in the Zoom. Nick will call on you and unmute.
Okay, Rochelle, go ahead.
The Beacon Hill Civic Association for 8 Louisburg Square. We feel that the applicant should provide more visual context of the rear facade and explain how the new design of the rear door meets guideline A3 as a missing architectural feature. End of comment.
Thank you, Rochelle. No other public comment, Mark.
Okay, Nick, can you just give us a little more context for that?
Yeah, so this is a rear door at the back of the property that's visible from West Cedar. And sorry, I have the photo here on my phone. I'm just gonna upload it to the computer very quickly, and then I will show you. It's really under our purview by a technicality, and I'll show you why in just a second here. So bear with me, just okay. Recent. There's a very small alley, date modified.
Oh yeah, right.
And drive. Oh, sorry, I put it in my personal. There we go. Upload. Okay. There we go. Okay. Let me just get this opened. So this view is from West Cedar Street, and this is a very generous view. It's zoomed in. The door's right here. So I believe it's currently it's just a single glass panel. Again, this is a very generous view. You still have, there's a gate in front of this, and I put my hand through the gate to take this photo.
Yeah, it's like a wire mesh gate almost. It's quite dense, you know. Yeah.
So that's why I have this on administrative. I'm happy to pull it and ask the applicant to appear next month if you feel that it warrants a conversation in person.
Well, the door you just showed us doesn't look particularly historic or architectural in the photo. Yeah, there's the gate. So you're looking through there, and then it's all the way through this half a block of these pretty large buildings.
Yep.
And then the backyard of 8 Louisburg Square, and then up to the second floor, and then on the back above the L on this on the top of the L. Okay, so can you just characterize what they're proposing to replace this door with?
Sure, I can actually bring it right up very quickly. This is 8 Louisburg. So this is Sean Kreitz. All right. And the proposal is here. That's not the shop drawing, sorry. Here's the shop. So the shop drawing's right here.
They need to be turned, Nick.
You got it.
Okay, so it's basically just replacing this door that's got one big plate glass window with something with muttons in it and stuff.
And true divided lights.
And true divided lights, yeah. Yeah, okay. I think I'm fine with that. I mean, given the circumstances of the de minimis visibility and also the it seems like it's an improvement to what's there, which is clearly not particularly historic or important in this facade of this building. But anyone have a different view?
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. So Rochelle, appreciate you bringing that to our attention. I think under the circumstances, though, I think I'm okay with leaving this to Nick's good judgment. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
No.
I agree.
Okay. With that, then, does anyone want to make a motion for approval of the administrative items?
A motion that we approve administrative items as they stand.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve administrative items en masse. We'll vote Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Feingold,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiefer votes aye, Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Okay, administrative items are approved. Thank you very much. And which brings us to Nick.
Yes. So thanks everybody for the productive hearing tonight. So just one update from staff. Commissioners, you should have all received an email at least this afternoon, but potentially earlier, of the Commissioner Appreciation event that will be held at our new offices here in 26 Court Street, which has been renovated and now houses the entire Office of Historic Preservation, Arts and Culture, Food Justice, the Environment Department, the Mayor's Office of Housing, and a couple others. But it's a state-of-the-art building. It's very beautiful, and we are having a celebration to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Boston Landmarks Commission, which was established in 1970. Well, the legislation was enabled in 1975, but the first commissioners and first hearings were held in 1976. So we'll be having that on February 12th, and you can RSVP in your email to come. We'd love to see you there. There will be drinks and food and presentations. So yeah, so that's really all I have for updates this evening.
Great, thanks. That sounds like a nice event. Was I the only one who did not get that email?
I did not get it.
Okay.
But I got it today and I signed up.
Good.
Yeah, I got it from Nick, but I did not get it directly.
I'll follow up with the powers that be. It was supposed to be all of our commissioners together, but
Who was the architect of the renovation?
Oh, oh, you're killing me. I love the questions. Let me see. I can get it. I just found their website today. 26 Court.
No, it's all right. Never mind.
No. I got you. Renovations. It was. Let's see here. Oh no, I can't say this. Mo, I'm just gonna put it on the screen. How about that? So this is the firm that was responsible for this, and here's
Oh.
So look here.
You know them.
Well, I know of them. I don't
Okay.
know them, but it's sort of like a father and son or something. It's
Yeah. So here's our new offices.
Looks great.
Yeah,
Hey, Marty.
it's state of the art. You know, we have soundproof booths, we have video conference rooms. All of our desks are stand sit desks. So they're pretty spectacular. So
You moved out of City Hall, huh?
yeah, we moved out of City Hall about 2 years ago. We were in the
Oh.
Kirstein Library,
Oh,
and
right,
then
right, right.
now we're all here in a central location, and it's a great space. So if anyone
Good.
wants a tour, just let me know, and I can give you a tour. So
Enjoy your new digs.
thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah, we're really
very
excited.
nice.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
thanks for the invitation, Nick. That sounds like a nice event. I look forward to it.
Good.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So
Motion
moved.
that we adjourn.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions?
Yay.
Okay. Thank you all for a great meeting, and we'll see you. I think probably at this event or next month.
Great.
See you in
Right.
February.
Thanks.
All right, everybody.
Okay,
Have a
guys.
good night. Bye.
Good night.